Welcome to the latest episode. She has tea.
Hello.
I have tea today. Actually,
Yeah,
this is the stash white and mint tea that I was talking about a couple weeks ago.
that's why I did the tea dance.
I am not drinking alcohol today because I took an ibuprofen for a headache. So, yeah, I don't like to mix stuff. So today is going to be a different type of episode because I'm not drinking. What the heck? Um,
Everything's going to be different.
I
I'm
want to
kidding.
remind everyone this will be the last episode of Mondays in MMORPGs for probably the next 6 weeks or so, at least until early May. Um, so, a little bit of background on why we're taking a break because basically, uh, Eloa has been out there beating the bushes the last few months, and we've been getting together what we're calling our stream team, our content creator affiliate team for the Saga of Lucimia, and we have a whole bunch of meetings that we've had over the past few weeks, and then we're doing one-on-one previews with a bunch of people over the next couple of weeks to figure out who exactly are going to be people that join our team for sure and work with us to represent the game throughout April and beyond through the rest of this year. So we have to do a lot of one-on-one sessions with people in our game over the next couple of weeks, which is those are tentatively like 3-hour sessions. And we
Yeah,
have,
time consuming.
yeah, they're time consuming and we have multiple per week. And then we also have on top of that, we have Saga of Lucimia testing. And then we also have the March 18th live stream coming up. And then we have all the post publicity for that. And then we have Q&As to schedule with all these streamers to the last half of March. And then once we hit April, we've got 4 weekends in a row where she and I are going to be nonstop logged into the game and then also running streams with people Monday through Friday. So basically, the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're just going to be over there doing all the stuff that we need to be doing for the launch of Stage 3. So, for those of you who follow the Mondays in MMORPG show, thank you so much for your support. We will be back, but we will be taking a little bit of a break here. 6 to 8 weeks is what we anticipate. Once we get past the April build, things should slow down and we should be able to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. On that note, we don't really have a set topic today, but I had a couple of just kind of questions. So I just wanted to make this kind of a random topic episode.
It's going to be fun.
First and foremost, how do you feel? Because I read this, I'm going to pull it up actually so that I can quote it. Um, how do you feel about voice acting in MMORPGs? Specifically, because there was a thread that I saw today over mmorpg.com where somebody wrote a post called Things That Bug Me about Star Wars The Old Republic. And in the comments, there was a person who said, um, number 5, he says, the story sucked. He says, I am biased on this. I think the story in nearly all games suck, but Star Wars The Old Republic seems to get a lot of praise for its story, and I could never understand why. Sure, the voice acting was a nice novelty, but its presentation, not the stories itself. I found the stories to be usual generic shite that we see everywhere, blah, 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 blah. He's not the only person I've seen who has said that voice acting for them is pointless. Like, they are the type of people who, whether it's presented in a text format or an audio format, they don't care. They will spacebar or escape and spam their way through because all they want is to get to the reward and see what do I need to do for the quest, and then they go off and do the
Yeah,
quest.
that may be true, but this guy doesn't seem to be that kind of player as is commenting on the story.
Sure, but this is
So
this is
it
what
means that
sparked the
he is
question.
interested. Well, obviously, if you are someone that just want to, do the action part of the game, like progression, gear, equipment, red or PvP, and that's what you're doing, that's what you're playing for, and everything else is, an addition that doesn't really interest you, or it can even be an hindrance to your progression. And of course, those people will space or skip the content, they don't care about voice acting. But that's not the majority of the player, because even a lot of players that are hardcore oriented on progression, succeeding, all that kind of stuff, they still do enjoy a good story. they might comment positively on the voice acting or negatively. I have some friends who sorry for
It's
that.
okay.
So we will have to cut it off. It will not last long.
It's all good. While we're waiting, I will talk over it. From my perspective, I've always loved voice acting. For me, it's one of those things that enhances the game for me. Star Wars: The Old Republic, in particular, I think there's two games that have done voice acting exceptionally well. One is Star Wars Republic. The second is Elder Scrolls Online. And if I had to pick between the two of them, I think Elder Scrolls Online actually has a higher quality of voice acting. But you also have to consider that the Elder Scrolls Online is a newer game than Star Wars: The Republic,
Yes.
and they also, I think, have polished that part of their game a lot more than Star Wars: The Old Republic has. They also obviously ESO has a much bigger player base, therefore they have a bigger budget and more money to kind of prioritize that. I know that the first time I played Star Wars: The Republic, it was just like this is so cool because it was like suddenly I'm like it's like I'm playing the Clone Wars or something, and it's all
Uh-huh.
voiced, 100% cutscenes. Like this is so
It is
awesome.
cool.
And there was all these voice actors who I've heard from other shows and other games, and so it was just a lot of fun. And then the I don't play ESO full time, but every time I go back to ESO, um, I am enthralled by the voice acting, especially because they do so much with the different races. And I know you do that on your streams sometimes, where you're actually kind of role playing with the accents and stuff. The Argonians crack me up. And then what are the cat
I
people?
have a very good Argonian voice,
Yeah, I know. What's the
set on my scale.
what are the cat people called?
The
The
Khajiit.
Khajiit. They're the other ones, and I just love some of the lore, like with them getting addicted to certain, drugs and going
Do
crazy.
you want skooma? Yes. This one has some delicious merchandise for you, made from the best moon sugar of elsewhere.
So see, this is one of those things where I think people who I don't understand people who say that they don't like voice acting because it really does add another level to the game in terms of
Hmm.
um, immersing yourself. But I guess the other thing I guess I could ask this is like, have you ever been the type of person who tries to skip through
Yeah, that
whether
happened.
okay what
It can
why would
happen
what at what point do you get to the point where you skip through?
when there's so much to read. It's laziness. I'm just like, oh, screw that. So when there is voice acting, I'm immersed into the story, or I decide that I will really get myself into the story. Then I will read everything carefully. Or I will listen to every dialogue and I will not skip. In the Elder Scroll Online, I have a lot of hard time to skip, even if I've done the quest like 5 times already. But
Specifically
let's
because it's voice acted?
I don't really know. Yeah, I think it's really captive me, and then I'm like, yeah, I've known that. I will take the short answer, but it's okay. I will tell you, it's very stupid. It's like I feel rude if I'm not listening up to the end. Just like if it was a real person. That's it. But who cares?
That's
I
fair
can I can
enough.
skip if I want. But I really have this first impression. No, I need to listen. And if it takes too long in my head, I'm saying, come on, get to the point. But I will still not skip the stuff.
But
But
you
that's
don't
very particular.
you don't feel that way when you're doing it with a text-based game. If the quest is too long,
Yeah.
you'll skip through it. Okay.
Like let's take the example of World of Warcraft. Maybe when I'm in the mood of lore and I want to get immersed into the quest, I will read everything. But if I'm more like, I need to get going, I need to get things done, then I'm going to read the short version of the quest and then get along. What happened very often to me as well is that I'm reading the quest attentively. I do 3 meters, I kill one mob, I forgot completely what I was doing and what was the quest about. And then I need to reread it or check the summary because everything is gone already. I wonder if you don't have a limited storage in your brain At some point, it's never get registered in your
I have
memory
a
anymore.
I have a counterpoint to that. I actually think it's, at least for me, when it's the filler content type of quest, like the throwaway repeatable fetch quests, my brain has just been trained over the years that I just filter it out. Like I don't even care like what the story is. It's like I'm just being told that I need to get 5 of these things, and that gets me experience points. So I'm like,
Hmm.
okay. And I only pay attention, like my mind only pays attention to the main storyline. Um,
This is a little bit of mistake too, in the sense where, and especially in a game like World of Warcraft, I will take World of Warcraft as a good example because you know how a lot of people are playing it, and it's a game that is not fully voice acted, just partially, quite a, a nice bit of it. But you have all those fetch quests, dailies, repeatable, blah, 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 blah. However, for the lore fanatic of World of Warcraft, the guys that are really passionate about the lore, they will find the best hint, some secret hidden in those fetch quests, non important things. You have even a little bit of lore when you put them together and you have a special Discord for that. You can reveal a very important secret that will then open a secret quest that will allow you to get a secret mount or something like that. And this year, at least in Battle for Azeroth, I've been following a little bit this. You really had a sort of conspirationist kind of group
hmm.
that are analyzing every stupid pieces of dialogue and lore, including let's say an activity like the island, the expedition island, which is as fast paced as a battleground. So you imagine the type of activity, not the immersive quest. It's really something, to get things done and to have your reward and your reputation and whatnot. But in all this series of island, you had some pieces of lore that were revealing certain secrets. And all of that is done for the lore fanatics. So they can really take the time to listen to every type of content because that's how the lore is spread and shared to the players.
I
So it's
think
really if you are into it or not.
there was a. This reminds me, there was a Lord of the Rings Online is a game I love. My brother and I love this game. I continually go back to this game every year. I feel like it's one of those games that just, for me, the lore of Middle Earth is rich and deep, and they've done a very good job of portraying that in the game, especially with the volume book quests, the epic quest lines. And that's actually a game where it pays off to do some of these fetch quests, in particular in the Troll Shaws. This is not going to mean any sense to you because you've never played Lord of
Mm-hmm.
the Rings Online, but for people who have played, um, there is a quest line in the Troll Shaws that starts off as, you're doing a series of fetch quests, and you're basically doing this quest hub to get to this quest hub to get to this quest hub, and you have to like basically unlock the next hub before you can go to it. So you're doing like these prerequisite quests, and you're basically getting led from point to point to point throughout the zone. And if you do that, if you actually follow all those quests, you'll eventually get led to an NPC who has a fairly long quest chain where you get to interact with Gollum. And the thing is like if you don't do any of the other quests of the zone, he won't even talk to you. Like the NPC won't even talk to you or give you a quest. But it's one of those things where if you take the time and actually do all of the content of the zone, and they have I don't know what other games do this, but I know at least in Lord of the Rings in particular, they have what they call deeds, which give you stat bonuses and stuff to your character. And one of the ways that you can earn a deed is by completing a certain amount of quests in a zone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it always stood out to me because it's actually one of my favorite quest chains in the whole game that I've played. And I'm up to Rohan basically. But it's one of those quests that it stood out to me over the years as like one of my favorite quests from Lord of the Rings Online, and yet it's only achievable if you do all of these other little fetch quests and things that I
Mm-hmm.
normally abhor, excuse me, and don't really like doing, and I just kind of naturally filter out. And I will say this too with Star Wars: The Republic. Um, the first time I played the game, I paid attention to everything. I listen to everything.
Hmm.
Now, the second time around, when I was taking alts through the same uh, zones and the same planets, a certain amount of the quest is unique to your character. Those are like the main storylines, the class
Yep.
storylines. So those I would watch all the cutscenes and everything else. But like the planet quests, when it's the second or third or fourth time you're doing the planet
Yeah,
quest,
of course.
I'm just hitting the space bar. It's like I don't give a
I,
shit.
I have done the same.
I know that I need to get the five things from off those three guys. Like I don't
You,
care. Just give me the
you
quest.
also, with Star Wars: The Old Republic, if you're a subscriber, you only need to do your main quest to have the experience to level up. You don't need to do the side quest,
I
if I
actually just
recall
played.
correctly.
So I actually just played last year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I played the first 3 weeks without a subscription, and then I went ahead and subbed because I was having so much fun. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna at least play this for like 2 months, so I'll go ahead and sub for a couple months. But I will say that even now, even on the free to play version, they give you these XP bonus,
Uh-huh.
basically potions or something that you can use even when you're not a subscriber. So even if you're not subbed, you can still get a bonus to your XP. And I played for 3 weeks, never had to do a single side quest because I was able to stay ahead of that by using this XP potions. So even if you're not
Mm-hmm.
a subscriber, you can do that. And I noticed once I turned the sub on, I never even needed to touch those experience points
Mm-hmm.
because you get such a huge bonus for being a subscriber. By the way, I've been really tempted to go back and play that game again.
Yeah,
That's
it
another
was a
one.
cool
I
game.
go back probably once every. It's not once every year. It's probably like once every 18 months. And the reason I don't go back so frequently with Star Wars: The Republic is because they don't push out enough content to keep me occupied. So they only do expansions like once a year, if that, and they're not very big. It's usually like a very small, you know, 6 to 10 hours of new storyline content and cutscenes and stuff. And
That game is not big enough, I think.
it's not. It
For
has a very small community, and it's a
it's
great game.
it's too bad because I was so excited before it released. I was really hyped. And I'm not the huge Star Wars fan. I like Star Wars, but I'm not a fan. I enjoy it, but that's it. But it was nice to have this universe, this world, and such. But there is definitively some stuff that I don't know. It would have been really great, but I don't know. There was some stuff that didn't work out very well. Also, this game released at the very worst period, I think,
They released
because
right
it's
at the time when everybody was going free to play, and so
and yeah,
you
it's
know
good. It's this whole era. I will say when World of Warcraft started to decrease, but yet you didn't. So you had certainly room for other games. Then every game were releasing at the same times. Guild Wars 2, Star Wars: The Old Republic, Elder Scrolls, all are in this era, and a lot of those, like Rifts, they were trying too much to copy some basic of World of Warcraft, while everyone was starting to be fed off of those things done by World of Warcraft, and people were starting to aspire to something really new and fresh. So I guess that's the reason why. One of the reason why it didn't succeed, it was not the best time. I think now will be a good time for any sort of game to be released. We don't have any MMORPG releasing last year or this year.
when was the last MMORPG to release? And let me rephrase that question. When was the last Western MMORPG that was not a Eastern port? Um,
Uh,
because
yeah,
we've had like Blade and Souls, but these are all games that are like
Black Desert
Black
and
Desert. These are
Arcade.
ports of like Asian
Yeah,
games. Um,
I think
maybe
the
not.
one of the last is Elder Scrolls Online. To be frank, Wildstar was
Did
after
Wild
Elder Scrolls.
was WildStar after Elder Scrolls Online?
Yes, just 2 months after.
When did ESO come out? Like 2000?
April 2014, and Wildstar was June 2014, something like
That
that.
doesn't feel like that long ago. Because
No, I know.
2014 was when we started our project.
Yeah, and do you imagine that 5 years and beside those Asian title and of course expansion and the like, or redone of the same games, you didn't have a
Yeah, I
new
don't. There
release.
hasn't been any.
No,
Big.
And all
Well,
all
I
game in
guess
development at the moment are indie MMORPG or
right, because I can say like
crowdfunded.
Shroud of the Avatar came out, I think,
Oh yeah,
2 years ago.
that one is after. Then you
That,
have also small
but that was an
games like
indie. That was an indie project, so it wasn't like a big, it
no,
wasn't like a AAA studio.
but there is no more AAA.
Not really. AAAs aren't really doing.
Yeah.
And this is something that I got asked during the mmorpg.com interview, um, which I think if it comes out today, the second part of the interview covers the part about risk. We were talking about why don't big companies make MMORPGs anymore, and the reason is because it's too risky. You can make I mean, it costs just to make a AAA game. So I got to spin this back around real quick to make this whole conversation make sense.
Yeah.
So I did um, the topic of the week we talked about a couple weeks ago on subscription pricing had a Business Insider article that talked about why $60 is too cheap for a modern AAA game. They should cost much more than $60 because the price point for that hasn't gone up, but yet the development costs have gone up. So to put this into perspective, a company like Rockstar or Take Two Gaming or whatever, um, big games, Red Dead Redemption 2, Cyberpunk 2077, these games cost literally. I mean, we're talking $500 million and beyond in terms of the cost of the game development and the cost of the marketing and everything else. And we're looking at 7 to 9 years of development time on these projects. So when a company is looking at what is going to make the most amount of money for us, traditionally it's not MMORPGs, it's mobile games, or they release these big open world games like The
Hmm.
Witcher 3, or a better example would not be Witcher 3. A better example would be Grand Theft Auto 5, I believe, and then they did Grand Theft Auto Online, and then they did Red Dead Redemption 2 with Red Dead Redemption Online. So they've
Hmm.
got these games that are single player, but they have enough of a player base to support an online version of it, which in essence is like an MMORPG, but it doesn't require all those resources because they're literally just taking all the assets from the single player game and using it for a multiplayer version. So when I was talking to mmorpg.com about the risks associated with MMORPGs, I don't know the cost to develop Elder Scrolls Online, but I remember that when BioWare had put out Star Wars: The Republic, this has been years ago now, but
Hmm.
as I remember, the total cost of like development and marketing and everything else
It
was
has
around,
been
it
crazy.
was like 250 or $300 million
Yeah, it was
to
crazy.
take that game and release it. So if that's a lot of money, because I know I've talked about if you have just 30 people building an MMORPG, you're going to have a game that costs on the low end 15 to 20 million dollars to produce. And the problem with MMORPGs is that you're not going to make all of your money back right away. An MMORPG is it's a game as a service, so it's meant to make money over a long period of time. But that's a risky venture for most companies in this era because of the way people play games these days. People play games, they do 2, 3 months here, 2, 3 months here, 2, 3 months here, 2, 3 months here. People
Hmm.
bounce. And so it's a very risky venture because if your game doesn't have a big enough team or a big enough audience to make enough money to support the team, then there's no reason to develop it. And most of these big companies, when we're talking a AAA studio, the staff members who are going to make these games are not little independent people who are happy with 60 to $80,000 paychecks. Like these people are making $150,000 a year. Like, so for a AAA developer to put 150 200 million dollars into a game, it just doesn't make sense in the current market. Even Pantheon, or not Pantheon, Vanguard, as I recall, was 40 million back in 2007. um, that's a huge chunk of change. Like by today's standards, I think it's around $90 million. Let's just say $100 million. $100 million, that's a lot of money. Like that's a lot of cheddar,
Yeah.
as they say.
And when you have to sunset it,
Hmm.
It's really heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because you think about, not only not only did all that money go into making it, then there's also the live staff that were employed for the,
Yeah, and all
five to
the
six
people that put their
years.
soul into it.
Right. And so there was this ongoing support staff that was generating another couple $1 million a year of cost
Mm,
for it. So, I can say that, for the risk factor in terms of this is why big companies don't want to make MMORPGs anymore because it's just really hard to find an audience that is going to stick with you over the long term. And I think that's one of the reasons why Elder Scrolls Online has done such a good job. And they're kind of consistently, I think them and Final Fantasy 14 are two of the games that are consistently talked
hmm
about as like kind of the premier MMORPGs of the modern era. And I think the reason is because both of those games they have a very regular um, patch
Content
cadence.
release,
Yes,
yeah.
content release. So it's like every 3 months there's something coming out from these people. Go
And
ahead.
they are serving their fan base. Final
Yes.
Fantasy is an IP, Elder Scrolls is an IP, and they really try to cater to please, and I'm saying please in the most positive sense, but to really do a sort of fan service. So they will propose the content that will please their audience. And even though they have a varied audience, so they will, release some piece for the hardcore guy, for the PvP guy, for the roleplay guy, for those that just like to do crafting, and you will have pieces of content for that are designed for everyone and that are very in their style, their own way. Final Fantasy and Elder Scrolls are super different from each other and they play differently. And you can enjoy them because you're a Final Fantasy fan or because you like video games in general and be in the mood of playing that game or that one. And it's nice because they have not tried to cater to everyone, yet by really respecting and affirming their own identity, that's how they made themselves interesting for almost everyone.
And I think that that's something it's a good thing to look towards and aspire to. I just when I was filling out the interview for Massively OP recently, one of the questions they asked was um, they were asking like what is our objective when in terms of releasing Saga of Lucimia?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we see ourselves fitting into this MMORPG industry? Do we think that we're going to be able to have enough subscribers to
Mm-hmm.
be something more than niche? And I kind of responded to that by saying, well, I don't really think that it does anybody any good to try to claim that any one game, because there's this sense from a lot of these players that, oh, Pantheon, oh, Saga of Lucimia, oh, Camelot Unchained, oh, Ashes of Creation. Pick the game that you like that's in development and use this phrase. It's going to be the savior of the MMORPG industry. I don't believe that at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is people don't just play one game anymore. People play lots of different games. So the only
Mm-hmm.
thing you can do as a developer is to create a game that is as fun as you can possibly make it, that's as bug free as possible as you can make it, and continue to repeat that process over and over and over. And hopefully, you've made something that's fun enough and entertaining enough that people come back regularly to play your game. And part of that is regularly updating your content
Yeah.
every 3 months because of the way people play games these days. It's very cyclical in nature. So if you're not giving me something to do and I've run out of content in 3 months, I'm going somewhere else. And I
Yeah.
still might go somewhere else, even if you do have constant patches coming out, because I like to play lots of different games. So, as an example, we've got the Final Fantasy VII remake coming out, I think, next month. Then there's Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out later this year. The Last of Us 2 is coming out later this year. I've pre-ordered all of those games. No, I haven't. I have not yet pre-ordered Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I've pre-ordered some of those games, and I will be playing those games when they come out. And I will also, like, I've really been debating about going ahead and pre-ordering Dual Universe because it's a game that even though it's still in alpha and everything, I look at what they're doing as a company, and they're doing lots of good things. They're continually bringing on new investors. They have two studios, one in France, one in Canada. They're doing really good things with their company, and it looks to be a very interesting game, even if it's not specifically something that I might traditionally play. But I look at it and I'm like, that kind of looks like fun, so I'll try it. And at the same time, like, I'll, I'm definitely I'm all over Baldur's Gate 3, and
Oh yeah,
and these
Diablo
games,
4. And,
yeah, and
oh.
Dragon Age 5 and the Dune game
Oh
that's going
yeah,
to
come
come out,
on.
like, so
It's too many games.
that's the thing. There's so many games. So
Yeah,
my
yeah.
wife and I, Chris and I, obviously we have Netflix, but there's not just Netflix. There's also Hulu and Amazon, and now there's these other. Apple has their own service now, and there's all these other streaming services. It's like every week there's like 10 new streaming shows that come on, and it's like we just don't have the time to keep up. So we literally just have to pick the ones that fit our, like, what we like, which is like fantasy and science fiction.
So it's first world problem, right,
Yeah,
guys? It's
totally a
like
first world problem.
the table of the buffet is too big. There's too much choice, and you can never. You want to try everything or almost
I
everything.
feel
So
like
you already eliminated,
my
and then you
greedy
try to
fat
make your
bastard.
plate, and it's already a mountain of stuff, and you're like, oh, but there will be no room for all those delicious dessert
But there's
after all of this.
cheesecake and there's brownies and there's but I want but there's
Yeah,
20 beers. I want to try every beer. That's just there's this overabundance of
yeah.
content, which this is something else. I mentioned this in my response to Massively, which will be coming out. Well, for those of you who read it, it'll be out by the time this comes out. Um, the was talking about, I don't look at Pantheon as competition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I'm living in an age. I can remember being a child, and growing up when PCs were first becoming a big thing, and adventure games. That was the thing when I was young, when I was 10, 15 years old, was adventure games. Before that, it was text-based games. But really, by the time I got to like 8 years old, it was, you had graphically, point and click adventure-based games, and that was kind of all there was. We didn't get the Nintendo until late 80s, I think, was when the Nintendo came out, and that was the first version of the console. And even with that, I can remember very well that, when it came out, all you had was like Mario and a couple of other games. But then as the library, you got Mario Brothers 2, Mario Brothers 3, you had Zelda, you had all these other games that started to come out on the Nintendo. But even then, it was still only, let's say, 50 new games a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
In between the PC adventure games and the PlayStation game, or the Nintendo games. Well, then the PlayStation comes out, and then we get the internet, and then we get into MMORPGs, and fast forward now to where we are today with,
MOBAs, rare RPG,
holy shit,
indie game,
there's like
point and click. Just
there's easily
yeah.
100 new games that come out every single week, or maybe not every week, but every month. There's at least 100 games that come out every single month around the world. So there are literally thousands of games coming out on a regular basis, and it's like I just have to pick the ones that I'm going to play. And so in my response to the article, I was like, I don't consider these other games to be competition. I look at those games and say, let's celebrate the fact that we're all able to make games, and that we have all these people who want to play our games, and
Mm-hmm.
who and revel in that, because 20 years ago that wasn't the case. Definitely not 30 years ago when I was a kid first getting into games, when I was 8, 9 years old. Now here I am at 40 years of age, and there's just this buffet of games to choose from. That's something that I think we're incredibly lucky to live in that
Yeah,
time, so to
and then
speak.
that's why also players can be picky, and
Yes.
maybe will it not explain why they are also so salty sometimes? Guys, I prefer dessert than savories. I think to be sweet is nicer than to be salty.
I like all. I do like savories. I do like
Yeah, but I don't
sweets.
like salty people.
Oh, well, no, I don't like salty people either, but I was thinking actual food, because you got me thinking about food at the moment.
It was an
Um,
analogy. I'm
so there's
sorry.
there's this thing. It's very Mexican. I don't know if they do it in any other. parts of the world. So in Mexico we have pigskin, and which is chicharron, and oh my God, is it delicious! But it's basically just fried pigskin, and it, it if you get it in a bag, it's like this crunchy, salty. It's just protein and fat, but it's so delicious. And you got me when you started talking about salty and sweet. I'm literally sitting here thinking about chicharron, and my mouth is watering at the moment.
Oh
Um, I also like chocolate. I'm a big chocolate fan.
yeah.
I like my wine. Yeah, but this is one of those things where I think that where we are today, there's just so much coming out. Um, it's going to be very interesting, I think, the next 5 years because obviously, we've got a lot of games like Ashes of Creation, Camelot Unchained, Chronicles of Lyria, Pantheon,
Crowfall, yeah.
Crowfall, Our Game. Thank you, Chris. You have all these games that are going to be coming out within the next 2 to 4 years, 2 to 5 years. Um, Star Citizen in there, and I think some of these games will redefine the genre. I definitely think that Star Citizen in particular is going to redefine a certain corner of the market,
Mm-hmm.
because they've already done that to a degree. I mean, no other crowdfunded game has done what they've done, which is raise, $300 million and just continue to expand the scope of what they're working on. Most games, you're lucky if you can get, 2 to 3 million on Kickstarter and then another 5 million from investors. So if you can get $10 to $15 million together, then you're doing pretty good by most crowdfunded standards. So to do 250 to $300 million is so beyond the scope of what most people are doing. But I know that Camelot Unchained in particular is trying to sort of, with what they're trying to do in particular, they're trying to redefine what can be done with massive PvP battles. I mean, I think their
Mm-hmm.
objective is to have like 1,000 people on screen at the same time fighting with each other. Like that's a big thing. Star Citizen is about creating this persistent, massive universe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know about the other games per se, and I don't know what Ashes of Creation is trying to do. Um, I know
Well,
for
the concept is really nice. It's really the question of seeing the world evolving and being shaped by the action of the players, and but in a very systematic way. So, I mean, the mechanics of the game itself, like the players are gathering experience for themselves. It will make the point of interest they were in starting to become a camp, then a little village, then a little city, then and it will be shaped by the most race that has been participating to that. So then it will have the housing of that particular race and stuff like this. And one server will be very different from the other server because players will not play at the same place, and so you have other spot of civilization that will pop out at other places, and then unlocking different type of quest and event and dungeon and stuff. So I think it's a very interesting game. If it succeeds to make it, that's another story entirely, but the idea, the concept is really really nice and unique to themselves.
Yeah, it's just I think the next few years in particular, we're finally going to see a new series of games come out. And what's interesting to me is that 100%, um, I guess you could exclude Star Citizen from this equation, but all the other games, it's all independent titles that are coming out. Every single
Yeah.
MMORPG that's in development right now that's coming out within the next few years is going to be a independent game from an independent studio. The only ones I can think of that are not are Star Citizen, because Star Citizen, with that amount of money, they're no longer an independent studio. They are a big AAA adventure. And there's also the Dune game that's in development from Funcom, and Funcom is obviously AAA studios, so I
Hmm.
think we have to consider that as a AAA game. But all the other games, Crowfall, Camelot, Ashes of Creation, Chronicles of Lyria, Our Game, Pantheon, six MMORPGs that are coming out in the next few years that are all,
Yeah,
independent
and
titles.
considering that we didn't have any good or important, let's say important, because I don't want to have a judgment of value here. Any important release has not happened for 2 or 3 years, maybe even more. I think it will be really nice to see all those new titles and that there will be all very, very different. But because when you read what they are all bringing, they all have one little common point. A lot of them, it's going back to the earliest day, while focusing on different area. Ashes of Creation is very much about mixing up PvP and PvE together, because that's a symbiosis for their game. It cannot work without the other. Well, Camelot and Chain is more about those huge battle, like you say. So that's more a pure PvP game, and or Crowfall, which is a PvP game, but more like a strategy plateau kind of game. And then Pantheon, which is the successor of EverQuest and stuff like that. And then there's us, the tabletop virtual environment. Yes. I
Yeah, I
think that
think
each of those games can interest a type of players or a type of desire. Maybe one month you want to do this, and another month you will want to do something different.
that it was very refreshing when we did the Preview 3 stream last Friday or whenever it was,
Mm-hmm.
a couple weeks ago now, I guess when this releases. Um, the commentary, that video went way beyond what I thought it was going to do. Like I thought, like all the stuff we do, we don't promote it. We just put it out on social media, and then whatever the world does with it, that's what happens after that. And it ended up getting picked up by a lot of different little gamer media outlets, and we've had community members telling us that they're parts of they're members in all these other discords, and that video is being shared out in all these other discords, and it's gotten thousands of views compared to a lot of our previous videos that only get 400 or 500 views when we're doing, because we're only ever promoting it to our internal group. But the one commentary that I thought was very interesting to see being talked about a lot was people were saying, "Oh, you really do seem to have captured that EverQuest feel in terms of the combat." And I was like, "Well, that's what we've been talking about for 5 years. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just nobody believed us that we were going to be able to make that happen. And now that we're able to finally show, because even in our pre-alpha stuff that we showed, up until a year and a half ago, we never had the full game loop in there. We were only ever
Yeah, yeah,
testing
exactly.
specific things, so we weren't ever to really to show that. So now that we're actually able to show that and actually let people get in and experience that firsthand, it's very refreshing to me, because that's kind of the angle that we're going, is the the cross between tabletop and EverQuest One. Like those two things for us are heavily influenced this game, but there's a lot more to it than that. I keep coming back to, um, and I think ESO has done this as well in terms of the lore of the game. I am from a personal level, I am far more interested in the lore of Lucemia becoming its own thing. So obviously we have the first book. Second book will come out later. We'll eventually get the tabletop version out. I've got other authors that are going to come in and write books in the shared universe. Like, I'm far more interested in seeing that all kind of develop over the next 10 years than just the MMORPG. And I actually saw something that interested me the other day. World of Warcraft has a new novel coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and they shared it on their social media. And I actually saw a bunch of people in the Facebook post that were complaining, because they're like, well, why aren't you putting this lore in the game? Why do I have to go read a novel? And it's like, because that's, some people like to read. Like, not everybody wants it to be shown in a cutscene. Like, some people want to actually have a world that exists beyond just the video game. And that's one thing I know World of Warcraft in particular has done over the years, is they've published a lot of novels. I've not read any of them, but I know they have. Has Elder Scrolls done that? Have they published any novels?
No, not really. So World of Warcraft does the novel things as part of how they are sharing the lore about the game.
Which I think is
So in
brilliant.
between each expansion, you have a novel that make the kind of link between the event. But then if you have not read the novel, you miss out a lot of references that are in the game. When you read the novel, all of this makes more sense, because you will see a quest that puts two characters that are in the novel. I've read only one novel, I've not even finished it. But then suddenly I was doing a little quest between two characters that it seems like a fetch quest. But it's two characters that are very important in the novel. So if you have read the book, then you're super happy to do this fetch quest. But if you have not, it's just another quest like all the others.
By the way, this past month, February into March, um, I think it's because we're coming out of the dark and we're doing all this publicity. These are the strong. It's been the strongest 30-day period for book sales
Oh,
since
nice.
since we launched the book in December of 2018. We sold a lot of copies over the last 30 days throughout February into March.
That's
And I want to thank everybody for making purchases, by the way. But I think that also goes to show you that there are a lot of people who do care about the lore enough to want to go
great.
out there and actually read a book, as opposed to only finding out about it in the game, because that's definitely what we're doing in the sense that if you've read the book, if you've read the first book, then you're going to understand a lot more of what's going on
Mm.
in volume one, especially when you start to meet some of the characters from the book in your adventures, or you end up at the same tavern that's mentioned in chapter two, or you end up in the catacombs that are mentioned in chapter four, and these
Yeah.
locations make a lot more sense. And there's an extra level. It's the same thing with Star Wars. I think that's something that Star Wars has done a very good job of since they first opened it up, when George Lucas first opened it up in the 90s to the expanded universe, and Timothy Zahn, or Timothy Zahn, I would never know how to pronounce his name. He started off with the original Thrawn trilogy, um, in like 91, 92, 93, somewhere around in there. I remember being like 11 or 12 years old and going into Walmart with my mom, and there was this stand like right when you walked in, and it just said Star Wars, and the name of the book was, I believe, Heir to the Empire, and it's got like this picture of this Jedi with his fingers like this, and there's lightning shooting out of his fingers, and there's like Luke Skywalker with Han Solo and Leia, and I was like, oh, there's new Star Wars stuff, and I went completely berserk. And I mean, I remember at one point, I bought every book that came out in the extended universe for like 10 years.
My
Um,
brother was doing that too.
yeah, and I'm one of those people who I really love lore. So, and that's just a part of me since I was a kid. I've loved books. So I really do appreciate it when, and I'm surprised Elder Scrolls hasn't done any novels because they have a
Not
really
really.
rich.
Yeah, they have a very rich lore, but the way, yeah, they could do. They have chronicle, so with different, or like the diary of one character. They have released that with a collector edition. I have one book that I've not read, for instance, but it's not really a novel. It's not really done the same way than World of Warcraft is doing, and they could definitively do that because it's such a rich universe. In addition, the way the Elder Scrolls is sharing its lore is quite particular in comparison to every other lore. Uh, Elder Scrolls Online does not have canon lore, or very little. Everything is shared through the eyes of the person that shared it. So if you have a book that's written by author, the book is the interpretation of the author. So beside the event that you're going through as a character, that's the only part that's really canon because that's really event that happened. Everything else is an interpretation. So you have a piece of lore that are contradicting each other. And it's up to you, the player, to make up your own mind.
I think I wish that more games would do books though. I think it's a great. I think there's a lot of different ways you can still stories. A lot of different ways you can tell stories. Um, Graphic novels work really well. Short film. Blizzard does a really good job with. And I've noticed that Elder
Mm.
Scrolls Online is starting to do this a lot more now too. Is they have these little short films that are coming out right before
Yeah,
each
and they are
expansion.
really good.
They are really good. I don't even play the game, but I follow their page on Facebook, so I always watch these videos, and I'm like, even though I don't play
I'm,
the game that often, these are cool cutscenes.
I'm like, guys, why are you not making movies like that? Why the movie industry is not having this quality of stuff in
So
the.
I'm gonna sidetrack now that you said that because um, something that I picked up recently. I am not a big anime fan. I
Mm-hmm.
do like animated movies. When I say anime, I mean the
The
traditional
Japanese one.
Japanese style.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has said that the Castlevania series on Netflix was really, really good, which is based on the Castlevania games from the Nintendo over the years. Or was it PlayStation? I don't remember. I think it was Nintendo. Anyway, so it's about Dracula, right? So I went ahead, and it's got like all these, really cool guys like Richard Armitage, who played Thorin in the Hobbit movies. It's at Graham McTavish, who also played one of the dwarves, but he was also in like Outlander, and he's a Scottish actor. Um, he was in most recently. People see him in Preacher as like the cowboy from hell. Anyway, they've got these really cool voice actors, and so I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. And the first season was kind of like, man, it was 4 episodes. They were like 30 minutes apiece. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? I got into the second season, which is what I'm watching now. So when I'm sitting on the exercise bike at the gym, they're nice little like 25-minute episodes. So it's a nice way to just, I don't really care for sitting on the exercise bike, but at the end of my workout, I go do an extra 20 minutes of cardio. It's just put that thing on my phone, and I've got 20 minutes where I just kind of zone out. And something I'm really loving about this second season is like they're actually investing in the character development now, and there's all this stuff that's happening where it's like it really feels like this epic adventure because of what's going on. The stakes are really high, but like they've done a really good job, even though I don't like anime style. The voice acting is
Mm-hmm.
so good, and the writing is pretty good. But then like they've got this character who in the first season she started off as like this kind of low level magic user, and now she's in the second season and she's becoming kind of this badass. And so there's these fight scenes where she's like causing a demon to explode with fire, and you're just kind of sitting there going, "Oh my god, this is so cool." And I really wish I'm on the same page with you, because I look and I see what Blizzard creates for social media and what Elder Scrolls Online creates with social media, and I ask the same question, like, why aren't these companies making movies like that? Also, Star Wars: Old Republic has done this with their uh, these 10 to 5 to 10 minute short films before each major expansion, like especially for the
Yep.
launch product. I mean, they could. It's just it costs a lot of money. So
The thing is that for a lot of those stories, I find their universe really deep, very interesting. I'm emotionally bound to a lot of them because I've played the game. Um,
it's
in
skooma.
in the quality of the the quality of the image, the scenery, how they are setting up their plots, it feels of a higher quality than a lot of the stuff that you see in the movie nowadays, which seems a little bit disappointing because it's too shallow. And here you have those vast empire of lore where you can create thousands of different type of stories with very deep character, events, land, places, a system of magie, cosmology, deities, whatever you name it.
I mean,
And
I
and
think.
and
Did you watch? I think you said it was too dark for you, or somebody did. Did you watch the Dark Crystal, the recent Dark Crystal show from Netflix?
I have started. I've only seen 2 episodes, I
So I
think.
think this is another great way if companies would, because Jim Henson Productions puts on some amazing stuff, and I would love to see. But the problem with all this is like when you're talking about a game, the MMORPG is their business, and to create an entire movie,
Of course not.
you're looking at a 10 to 15 million
But
dollar investment.
why are the Warner Bros. And whatever other cinema company are not inspiring themselves from what's really good and exciting? Like, for instance, the Diablo cinematic. I
The
was
most recent
stuck
one?
on my chair. Yeah, I was like, I think I'm not like that. Like with my jaw dropping when I'm seeing a movie. That never happened anymore. But this cinematic, I was so into
It
it. I
was
say, come on!
intense. It was
It
intense.
was
Like, 'cause, I mean,
intense,
they're just,
beautiful, gorgeous.
and I had no idea what was coming because it starts off like this group of adventurers are on the
Hmm.
doorstep and they're trying to open up the and it's a tomb. Like, something
Yeah,
bad's
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
happen when they open it up. But still, it was like you're like, come on, they're all gonna live, and then you get inside and people start betraying each other, and then the demon comes out, and it's like, oh my god, like this
Yeah,
is.
exactly. And it has something poetic as well in the image and how they,
Yeah,
set up everything. It
I
was
don't get that.
beautiful.
I don't get that from movies anymore. I really don't. And I actually told somebody recently, I think this is Bobby actually. I said that I have no intention of, like, I'm not going to go to the movie theater for any of the stage 3 Marvel movies. Like, I went to the theater for all of the stage 1 and stage 2 films. So those 20 some films between Iron Man and the last Avengers Endgame movie. I went to the theater for all of those. But once the story finished, like, I know there's going to be another Guardians of the Galaxy movie and there's all this stuff coming out on Disney Plus, but I have no desire to go to the theater to see it anymore. Like, I'm just kind of like, like Marvel movies to me, I've seen so many of them over the past 10, 15 years now that I'm kind of like, it's just explosions and special effects and there's not a lot there. And I honestly, this is going to sound weird. Um, so I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Not as much these days as I used to be, but I've shared the picture somewhere on our Discord
Yeah.
at one point of when I was in costume for Qui-Gon Jinn going to the Phantom Menace, and like I was a big Star Wars nerd for a very long time, and the books and everything else, all the comics. Um, I don't give a shit about the Disney movies. I really don't. Like, I've seen them. I went to the theater and I watched all of them, Last Jedi, Force Awakens, whatever the most recent one was. And I'm just like, it's cool. Like, yeah, I can go see lightsabers and yeah, I get to see Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher, but it doesn't have the same soul that it used to
Hmm.
have for me. And I feel the same way. Like, they're talking about they're gonna do a new Indiana Jones movie with Harrison Ford, who's
Again,
like 80 years old now, and it's like, well, how? That's whatever. Like, I'll see it, but I'm not gonna go in, and my
we
jaw's
need
not
new
gonna drop.
stuff.
This thank you. We need new stuff, and this is an issue with Hollywood in particular, where all they ever do is recycle. Like, everything is a reboot. Like,
Yeah,
how many times? So somebody was talking about this the other
it's
day.
too much.
How many times is a new Batman movie going to come out or a new Spider-Man
Yeah,
movie come out?
exactly.
Like,
There's so many
I,
rich universe. You could
like
either create one. Oh,
nobody gives,
sorry.
like, I've seen the Batman origin story 20 times now in film and animation, and we all know his parents get shot and killed. Who gives a shit? We've already seen it. Spider-Man, we know his uncle's going to die. We don't care. Like, this is why I'm really happy. For example, Amazon is filming The Wheel of Time, which is an amazing book series. I'm, fingers crossed that the show is going to turn out to be well, because I also had high hopes for the Shannara, the Sword of Shannara series, and MTV really dropped the ball with that show. Um, Everybody was like super hot and super young, and it just wasn't believable because, like, they never got dirty, and they were always just like super sexy and perfect bodies, and it was like, I'm not feeling like,
It's on MTV. What do you think?
yeah, it's
What
like
were you expecting?
I didn't feel like it was a fantasy world. Like,
Yeah.
when you watch Game of Thrones, one of the things that really made you feel invested in that show is because it felt real. It felt gritty, and everybody was like really in it to, win or die. And that sort of Shannara, and also they did the Sword of Truth 10 years ago now, which only did 2 seasons, which was another great show. But it was also like this show where, like, the lead actors were like in perfect shape. They were young, very hot, sexy, and it just never felt like they were really. It was a good show, by the way. Both of those are good shows, but just didn't feel like the books felt because they were trying to make it too modern and too flashy, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really hoping, like, the wheel, because we've got the new Wheel of Time show, and Amazon's also doing the new Lord of the Rings show, which is based on the Second Age, so it's about,
Mm-hmm.
Isildur and the War of the Ring and everything else. There are a lot of shows that are coming out that are not, and movies as well, that are not repeats. But when you look at what the major studios are talking about, and I swear this will come back around to gaming in a minute. So I just watched the most recent season, season 2 of Altered Carbon. Altered Carbon is an amazing, like, science fiction kind of cyberpunk show. The second season came out, and was it Andrew Mackie, I think, or something Mackie? He's the guy who played the Falcon in um, the Marvel movies. Anyway, he's the new character in this new film, and I was watching him do press the other day, and he was talking about like all of the original, like all of the best filmmakers right now are not doing movies. They're doing Netflix. They're doing streaming services
Ah,
because movie
yeah.
making these days, and this is how it ties back into gaming. I promise I'm going to tie it back into gaming. Movie studios like Warner Brothers, Marvel, Disney, they're only willing to make a movie if they know that they're going to make $1 billion off of it. So they're not willing to make a movie that's only going to make 100 million. They're only going to make something if it makes this huge amount of money. And in order to make that kind of money, they have to be willing to make a 300 to 500 million dollar movie. So there's no risk factor. They're not willing to take a risk on a small $10 million film because to them they're not gonna be able to justify it. They're like, well, we want to make $1 billion. We can't make $1 billion on a $10 million film. Also, Simon Pegg talked about this recently, like why they're not willing to make why it's so hard for them to make a new Star Trek movie because Star Trek movies don't make Marvel money, and so Paramount is very nervous to invest 250 million dollars into making a new Star Trek movie because they never make $1 billion. They only make 500, 600 million. So when you look at the game studios, this goes back to why game studios aren't creating MMORPGs, is because they're looking at that from the same perspective of going, if we're going to put an investment and if we're going to make a game, we need to make sure that it's a big game that's going to make a lot of money and it's going to be like game of the year. It's going to sell 60 million copies. And the only way they can do that is by making a $500 million game like Red Dead Redemption 2 or Cyberpunk 27 or The Last of Us 2, where they're spending 7 years and $500 million on these games.
And yet, to be able to create those worlds, to be able to create those new stories, those new lore, those new character, at some point, you have to take the risk to put it out. Otherwise, you will never have something fresh and new if you never try to do something new.
That's why we're doing what we're doing with Saga of Lucimia.
Yay! And that's a perfect conclusion for
Yes,
this
it is.
episode.
Because we're over an hour, so people are gonna be like, "Why are they talking about movies? Why aren't they talking about games?"
Well,
So hope you guys
it is.
enjoyed. We'd love to hear your comments on all the stuff we talked about today, and I think on a closing note, because the next 6 to 8 weeks from us, like I said, we're gonna be so busy with Saga of Lucimia stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear what you think that's great about our game and things that you're looking forward to seeing as we continue to flesh out our game. But obviously, we'd love to hear what are things you like about other games that are up and coming. I think this is a really exciting time to live in because there is just this huge buffet of put everything on our plate and play all these games. I still haven't even finished Divinity Original Sin 2 and or 1, and yet I'm waiting for Baldur's Gate 3. It's like I don't have enough
I'm not
time.
even touching. You know what I'm doing with the buffet? I'm just selecting few meals, but I'm eating them regularly.
Eating a couple forkfuls here and there, and I'll get back to that eventually. All right, thanks everyone. We will see you
Bye, guys.
in a couple of months in May at some point. So thanks for
Yeah,
following
take
along.
care of yourself. Thank you.